Hi everyone, and welcome to Executive Support Global 2023. My name is Aliina Rowe, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today about a topic I'm passionate about, the administrative profession defining its role in organizational change. I believe we are already engaging in change in our roles every day, and today we will take a look at how we engage in change with a new approach, starting with small steps, which can have a big impact for ourselves and our teams. A short introduction about myself and my background on the topic of change. I've been working in the financial services industry for over 20 years, nearly 10 of those as an executive assistant. I enjoy writing and have authored articles on the topic as well in Executive Support magazine. I'm really a lifelong learner, and in recent years I've focused on learning more about organizational behavior and organizational change. Why? Because I can see how integral assistance can be in supporting change in our organizations when we work proactively together with the leaders and teams we support with a lens towards driving change. In 2020, I began really focusing on the topic of change to obtain my Change Management Practitioner certification, and shortly after went on to study at Warwick Business School and completed a postgraduate diploma in organizational change. In order to complete this diploma, we had to write a 6,000-word thesis paper to bring together all we had learned on the topic of organizational change. I chose to dive into how our profession, as administrative professionals, engages with change in our roles. Many of the results from that you will see today in this session, including a new framework for executive support professionals to engage in change in their roles. I was able to present that paper at the World Administrators Alliance Summit this past October, and I remain incredibly grateful to have been there with the executive that I support and association leaders from across the globe. When I started to research organizational change, I really could not have imagined at the time sitting in front of you here today speaking on the subject. But diving into the topic became a wider experience for me, and a journey much greater than the 6,000 words, some 20 pages, and numerous references and citations. And that is because of the incredible community of assistants that I came to know. It has made me confident to tell you today that our profession is absolutely and totally uniquely suited to make an impact in our organization when it comes to managing and facilitating progress for change. We've all been dealing with change, especially over the last years with the pandemic, which just turned everything on its head. We experienced change within ourselves and our organizations. The thing is, we've always been faced with change, and we will continue to be faced with more ahead. And because of this, our organizations need us to proactively approach change, not only as individuals, but to go beyond, reaching out to support the leaders we sit beside on a daily basis and facilitate progress within our teams. So these are the doors I walk through every day to work. There are so many approaches to change in our roles and in our day-to-day, and there is no one right approach. My role here today with you is to pass on what I've learned, what I have found valuable, and what resonated with me. And I hope it can resonate with you too. So as an executive assistant, personal assistant, or whichever title you may hold, as an administrative professional, my hope for today, after our short time together, is that you can see yourself engaging in organizational change and move forward proactively, engaging in organizational change in your role in a new light and with heightened awareness. We are in this together when it comes to elevating our profession. And one way we can do that is by highlighting the supportive role that we play every day when it comes to driving organizational change with the teams and the people that we support. So how can we approach this huge, vast topic of change that is all-encompassing? Today, we'll look at change through three lenses: organizational change and what is necessary for change, administrative professionals and the skills that we have that are so fitting to engage with change in our organizations, and the fact that small things matter. This may be a phrase that you have heard in your own lives. Small things matter. Tiny steps, step by step, sweat the small stuff. And it's true. The small things matter in life, in organizations, and in change. We'll look at a new framework, a result of the paper that I wrote. We'll start by defining small matters. We will look at the importance of mindset. And here comes a big topic, information management. We will look about acquiring and assessing information. We'll look at leveraging information. And last but not least, learning by asking the right questions. Feel free to refer to the handout provided for this session when we get to the framework. Maybe you want to write down any observations or actions that are relevant for you in your role. Let's first start by looking at organizational change. Change is so dynamic, which is maybe why I find it so exciting, even though change can be incredibly hard. We experience all sorts of changes in our organizations, whether it be transformational, incremental, or continuous. Transformational change, for example, when we talk about transformational change, we talk about a shift in business culture or adopting radically different technologies or major strategic or cultural changes, operational changes, things that are organizational wide, really. Crises can result in transformational change, for example. Incremental change, small adjustments. They don't significantly impact a full existing structure, but they are changes nonetheless. Process changes, for example, could be incremental, and I know you're very familiar with process changes. Continuous change are ongoing efforts to improve our capabilities and processes in organizations. It's about growth and development and change that evolves over time. Cultural shift that maybe happens over time. Maybe we can think of continuous change as a journey. This area of change is of particular focus for us as administrative professionals, because even if there isn't a specific published change initiative, you have to know that for yourself in your own role and people and teams that you support, that there is always an undercurrent of change. And so this topic is always relevant. When you think of change, you may have in mind changes in strategy or structures, technology, infrastructure, internal processes, a big one for us, and culture. Change is happening at all levels. Take a moment to think about what type of change are you facing right now. I'm sure there must be one or some in your organizations. I don't know what your meeting rooms look like, but from wherever you're sitting, think of what you and your organizations are going through now or must have gone through in the past 2 years, for example, with the pandemic and managing that crisis and what changes were happening. We're experiencing change at all fronts as individuals, as a team, and as organizations. And all of these levels are at interplay with one another. So it's important to bear that in mind. Let's focus on the individual. I know this sounds obvious, but it's worth remembering that we all come to whichever change we are facing as individuals with different views. On day one of the organizational change diploma, our professor put up a picture similar to this of a window and a view of an unknown field and explained eloquently how we can come to change with our different views and our backgrounds and experiences, and how important it was for us to bear in mind that as we move forward in learning about organizational change, that we all come with our own view. This message and the picture has stuck with me since, and I think about it often. Perhaps this is another way of saying putting yourself in someone else's shoes, but rather putting yourself in someone else's view. This picture here is a little blurry, because I don't know what it looks like from where you are sitting when it comes to change. What does change look like from where you're sitting? And what about those of the individuals in your teams? Can you put yourself in their view? What can you do in your role to glean a clearer and more vivid picture of how people are viewing change from their view? And maybe we can bring that view into better focus. At the end of the day, organizational change is indeed about changing hearts and minds. It is a balancing act, and some days you and the people you support or your teams may feel like they are walking the fine line of change. This is normal. Embrace this as best you can. It's really about getting to the other side the best way possible. So, how do administrative professionals engage in change? We already have many of the skills and are already performing many of the tasks needed. So, throughout studying organizational change and getting to know various types of change, what change requires came to light for me. And while no administrative role is the same, we all wear many different hats, and we know we have over 160 job titles for our profession. We do have quite some things in common. Engaging with change requires inclusivity, and administrative professionals are incredibly welcoming. Look no further than our onboarding members of our team. This is incredibly important. And the fact that we are often well connected in our organizations and networks and have the ability to connect people to each other. Organizational change requires learning. And when we are doing our job well, we are asking questions and 2 steps ahead, trying to stay ahead of the curve so we're ready for what's coming tomorrow. Organizational change requires creativity, and we are certainly resourceful. If something needs to be solved, we can count on us as the doers of our organizations to know where to go, where to start. We may not have the direct answer, but certainly it's within our roles to look for a way to find the answer. Organizational change requires self-organization, and we are influential and can be proactive. Organizational change does not and cannot only come from the top. It has to come from all levels, administrative professionals included. And we are completely capable of being influential and proactive when it comes to change and self-organization. Organizational change requires storytelling. There are narratives happening in our organizations which are incredibly important when it comes to implementing change. Did you know that stories that people tell circulate on average to some 30 people? It's important for us as admin professionals to be aware of this fact, that stories are important and they're circulating, and to listen to those stories being told, and to understand how a change is being perceived in our organizations. Organizational change also requires attention to details, and this is a big one. And I know you are the kings and queens of details here on this call. It is about the small stuff, and we know that administrative professionals are detail-oriented. When I look at the skill set and attributes here in an organization undergoing change, I can say without a doubt that as an organization, I would want my administrative professionals on board and ready and willing to engage with change. So here we have the Global Skills Matrix. I hope you're familiar with this, published from the World Administrators Alliance. I was so happy that it was published while I was writing this paper. It outlines our skill sets well, and while we may not find change written explicitly in this matrix, many of the skills and tasks listed here are conducive and necessary to engaging and facilitating and supporting change. Let us not forget that 73 of administrative professionals felt that organizations didn't understand their role or their potential impact. When it comes to organizational change, we know that we can have a lot of impact there. So we can use these skills in our daily work. Think about your daily work for a minute. Maybe it isn't divided exactly like this, but if you were to divide your day, it may look similar. And a majority of the day will be handling change, no matter which industry we're in. For example, the financial services industry or any other industry, any of our days may look something like this. We're dealing with business as usual, BAU, or ad hoc requests, and then change, like plan change initiatives, always maybe updating technologies or a restructure which is planned, or unplanned change, which is more often the case sometimes. We know this too well, especially in the last 2 years. If you weren't convinced before, I hope that you are now, that the things you do in your job day to day certainly involve change. So now that we've taken a look at change itself and how our profession is a good fit for being involved proactively in supporting change, how can we go about approaching change as administrative professionals? This brings us to the topic today about how it is the small things that matter. Have you heard the phrase "the small things matter"? I'm sure you have. I have to admit it is difficult to define. Believe me, I tried. And it means different things to different people. We will define it here today because the small stuff is equally important as the big stuff. Details and connections and individuals hold the same weight, really, as big picture and vision, strategy, and leadership. You, as administrative professionals, all the small things that we do on a daily basis, this matters. I know many of you have days where you leave work and you're like, what have I done today? On paper. Small things matter to build foundations, to create momentum, to get change going, and to drive change. I've come to fully understand the importance of this phrase, and it's not just something that we say time and time again. In practice, it is definitely true. In writing on the topic in the research paper, as I said, I did aim to define small things matter. I wanted to see where I could find it written in all this organizational change literature that was put in front of us. And you know what? I found it everywhere within many of these books. The importance of paying attention to the small stuff, sweating small stuff, and the details. I also looked at content in our administrative profession. The point of paying attention to details and individuals and connections, again, was everywhere in our daily work. Here's just 2 points to highlight found in the change literature on the topic. For example, Richard Axelrod in his book Terms of Engagement writes, creating an engaged organization means you sweat the small stuff. You focus on daily context. This is a huge part of our job, isn't it? Focusing on daily context of the leaders and the teams we support. Creating an engaged organization is incredibly important for dealing with change. Annabelle and Kramer, in their book The Progress Principle, write the statistic: 28% of small events triggered big reactions. Even events that people thought were unimportant often had powerful effects on inner work life, which again impacts how people show up for change. The statistic could be a little scary, knowing that nearly a third of small events create big reactions. But let us use this to know that small events that are happening day to day in our work matter, and we can and should pay attention, because it matters then how people will engage with change. All of the information on these books and sources are in the handout, by the way, in case you're interested in reading about any of this later on. So remember when I said that there was no one right approach to change? In studying organizational change in our course, we looked at numerous frameworks you may have heard about. Kotter's 8 Steps, for example, Kurt Lewin's framework, or Kubler-Ross's work on various stages in change. These are all really valuable, tried and tested frameworks that we should all consider. But I didn't find so much that was specific to our profession. And I wanted to create something where I could see myself and our profession proactively engaging with change. And I knew I wanted to encapsulate the idea of small things matter. I thought of all sorts of acronyms and combinations and ways to explain change. And here we are with this framework in front of you. The thing about a framework, it is not a prescription to do exactly as stated. It is a permission to look at a topic, see where it resonates and how it fits with you and your organization, and work with it. Often the beauty of a framework lies at its edges, where you can stretch it and tweak it and use it for what's relevant for you. I hope that you can see yourself in some way in these steps we will look at here. Today we won't go into great detail, but we will capture here the essence. Please use your handout if you like to note down observations or action points that may be relevant for you. Let's start with the first step. So small matters is about how you begin to engage in change, a first grounding step, grounded in the knowledge that small things do matter, as we spoke about before, and begin and start. We know the people we are supporting are concentrating on strategy and vision and very consequential topics, all while managing people and teams. We need to work with them and alongside them in our support roles to pick things up that are simply doable now and informal that we may not need permission for, and with a focus on connecting people and teams, which is really core to how small things matter. What does this look like and what kind of questions can we ask? Maybe consider and ask yourself, from where can you start right now that may make a difference in connecting and engaging your colleagues? Be the bridge that connects people. We aren't talking about, oh, I know this person, I know that person. I'm talking about personal and purposeful connections, either with yourself or connecting people to others. From where we sit in our organizations, we are really uniquely suited to connect people at all levels. Think back to the changes that your organization is facing. Do you have one in mind? What about a lot of us now are still transitioning to a hybrid environment, for example, where it's becoming very interesting and sometimes challenging to be able to connect people. Think about, are you maximizing inclusivity in your meetings? Are you making those purposeful connections for yourself or between people? And are you providing people with the resources that they need to get their job done? Think back to the colleagues who are engaging in change. What does their view look like? Is there an opportunity to engage, to glean a clearer picture of where they may be coming from? Use the skills that you have, such as working autonomously. We're very good at that. Your self-motivation and your attention to detail to really make an impact. Let's look at mindset. All research points to the mindset of leaders as being fundamental for change. It's incredibly important that we as administrative professionals are aware of this fact for ourselves and for the leaders and teams that we support. We need to approach change together. And a mindset for change is best served in a nurturing environment, and this requires creating time, space, and focus. How can we create this nurturing environment? So I adapted suggestions from an article that we read on mindset and the new capabilities needed for change, which you will also find a link to in your handout. Let's take a look here at these 4 steps. First of all, engage. Engage is about creating free time and space deliberately and pausing. This may seem counterintuitive, but I do want to get your attention here. If we can think about actively creating time and space as an activity in and of itself, we can end up moving better and faster forward. We need time and space to pause for clear thinking, creativity, and ultimately action. Embrace the unknown. Set the direction, but not the destination, and enjoy the journey if you can. Listen and think from a place of not knowing and remain curious. In a move to a hybrid working environment, for example, this can mean being comfortable with not knowing how this new way of working is going to be 1 or 2 or 5 years from now. Experiment. Experimenting can make change fun and engaging. Our profession is on the front line of processes. Why not use this? Your experience and your expertise to, for example, be a pilot user in a new initiative. You bring a lot of know-how in your role, especially when it comes to processes. And energize. Be an advocate for the organization's objectives and proactively bring people together in a positive way. Change is hard. We need to raise the momentum and excitement where we can. One important point that did become apparent in the research, however, was that advocating and energizing is not just about simply repeating objectives and goals. This may actually drive people away, simply repeating objectives. We really need to engage and listen in a thoughtful and positive way. Remember Annabelle and Kramer's quote about 28% of small events triggered big reaction. Even events that people thought were unimportant often had powerful effects. So all of these things have the potential to impact and support your leaders and teams you work with when it comes to driving change. Consider, where can you start right now that creates an environment that allows for time, space, and focus? Can you be curious and ask questions and accept and embrace the unknown and changes happening around you? Is there an opportunity for you to experiment? And is there an opportunity to energize? Use the skill set that you have as an administrative professional, such as being adaptable and time management, while also keeping the leader and the team you support accessible. And also understanding business objectives is another important skill here, so you can energize and advocate for those objectives. So here's a big topic we could spend many more hours on, information management. Let's look at how we can tackle this with acquiring information and assessing information. We need good information to engage and change. And our profession is uniquely positioned when it comes to being and staying informed. Excuse me. Research suggests that organizations need to keep information flow well stocked and to see information as nourishment rather than power. Margaret Wheatley writes this in her book Leadership in the New Science, and the idea of being beacons of information. How can we do this? Another article we read from MIT Sloan, which was called Staying in the Know, utilized a framework called the Personal Knowledge Infrastructure. I found this framework to be highly relevant for our profession. It's a big part of what we do, acquiring information. For acquiring information, I've adapted that framework here. So routines is how we spend our day. In a hybrid working environment, for example, this has been changing for many of us, and it affects our information flow in a big way. Resources are tools and technologies. We're bombarded with myriad choices of resources of where we can access and acquire information every day. Relationships, of course, are networking possibilities. In a new hybrid working environment, maybe we have lost opportunities for face-to-face or in-person communication. On the other hand, many have increased opportunities to connect with others with the click of a button. So, assessing information, what kind of information are we looking out for now? In a book, Strategic Communication, David Cohen outlined a framework called the dialogue box, which covered 4 zones of communication. Communication is really how information is shared. So it was an ideal framework to expand upon to categorize the kinds of information flowing in our organizations. You may think of information as just facts and figures, but it's really so much more than that. As administrative professionals, we are taking in all sorts of information. Intelligence is indeed the facts and the data. This is where we can begin to think about the information we have, what we might be missing, who needs more information or facts or data. Emotions, we know there's fearness, sadness, happiness, plus a million others of other emotions that people will experience. Emotions should not be ignored in change, and everybody has emotions. This is where we can step in as administrative professionals, as our corporate thermometer, to think about how emotions are running, if they're running high or if they're running low. Interpretations is how organizations and people understand and make sense of information. They decide if it's true or not, or where is this information coming from, listening to different perspectives. Maybe there's rumors going around. Does this match with what the storyline was meant to be, for example, and how it shows how people are making sense of the facts and the feelings that are circulating. In an organization, this is a collective exercise, and we're doing this together. Narratives are the stories that people are telling in our organizations. This is where we begin to think, okay, what is the main narrative? What is the main story? What are the counter narratives against that? And where are the disconnects there? Consider, where can you start right now to improve the information flow for the teams that you support? Are your routines and your relationships and resources set up to make you successful? And also, when assessing information, what do you know? What is the morale? How are people interpreting information? And does this match with what really needs to be communicated? What stories are being told, for example? Leveraging information. What do we do with all this when we have this in a responsible way towards facilitating and supporting change? First of all, we can bridge information gaps. Fear has roots of lack of information. We can easily sometimes resolve or alleviate some fears by bridging information gaps and sharing any facts or data that people might be missing. The less fearful people are, the more likely they are to engage positively with change. Focusing attention is about paying attention to emotions. In good situations, we can raise the emotions, and in bad situations, we can support in calming emotions. The first step in managing emotions and focusing attention is simply acknowledging them. This can already really go a long way to making employees feel heard. Advocating is about advocating the narrative organization or the people that we support where we can, keeping in mind, again, that simply repeating will only create silence and disengagement, which was one important point that was reiterated in the research. We need to engage in a positive way. Acknowledging individuals is about just that, acknowledging that people are coming with different perspectives. We want to acknowledge them so that they feel heard. Celebration, last but not least. As administrative professionals, we are often planning events and celebrations. It's important. It's not only just for fun. Celebration is an important motivational factor. We can find opportunities to celebrate progress and acknowledge small wins, which can have a strong effect. So consider all of these things when you've acquired and assessed your information and how you can leverage that information to move forward and change. Use your skills that you have, which would be your anticipation and your initiative, your proactiveness of supporting and driving organizations' objectives, and your team building and event management skills. So we're nearly there, learning. Finally, while this looks indeed like the last step, learning should be happening all along the path of change. Asking where there is room for improvement will allow us to begin anew. What did we hear? Who has a different perspective? What is working? What is not working? And what do we need to know more about? Sounds so simple, right? But a lot of times we don't take this step to sit down and deliberately ask these questions. We simply move on to the next thing. Use the skills that you have as an administrative professional. Skills of process improvement and problem solving, of being resilient and strategic thinking and understanding, and the knowledge that you have. So that was the framework, a new approach for our profession to engage in and define a role in organizational change with these small steps. Focus on details, individuals, and connections. Create momentum to drive change forward, and define your role in change. We've come full circle now in our session, and I hope you see how organizational change and our profession go hand in hand, and that there is a framework you can use to move forward in defining your role in change. I would encourage you to start to engage in change now, not only for yourself as an individual, but to go beyond, as you so often do in your roles, for the leaders and the teams you support and for your organization. Where do we go from here? The world continues to move ahead in small steps, punctuated by the occasional big one, just as it always has. Thank you so much for attending the session today. You can reach out to me anytime, and I'm more than happy to speak with you on the topic. And I'm here for any questions that you may have. Thank you.